Hi guys, Miss Kimbrough here, reporting to you from my basement, where I've got kind of a cool project started down here. I currently have 10 baby chicks sitting right next to me in this nice little tank over there in that corner. So that's kind of what I've been doing lately. I just want to talk to you guys today about what that kind of process would look like. Maybe if you want to raise your own chicks or start your own flock, or even add to your flock if you've already got one. So I'm going to talk about things that you need to raise chicks, maybe your purpose for raising chicks, how many you might want to do, things to consider around that, how old they need to be outside, etc. So kind of start with actually some breeds that I've got in here anyways, and the purpose. So for raising chickens, there's going to be a couple of purposes that you would do that. Obviously you could do pets too, but in terms of this, I'm thinking about raising chickens for egg production and raising them for meat, or you could have a dual purpose, which would be kind of an in-between breed. So for the purposes of my flock, I'm using them solely for egg production. So all the ones I've gotten here, that's kind of what the purpose is for them. So I'll kind of show you some of those. So to start off with, I have 2 black Australorps, I've got 2 Barred Rocks, 2 Production Reds, 2 Silver Laced Wyandottes, 1 Rhode Island Red, and 1 Buff Orpington. So I'll pull a couple of those out and kind of show them to you, show you what they look like, and maybe even show you some of the size differences between even 1 week and 2 weeks old. So starting off with, this is the black Australorp. So, kind of what they look like. Doesn't like being held very much, as you can tell. So, that's kind of what he looks like. She looks like, actually. Also in here, I've got the Barred Rock. This one, I have one that's 1 week old, and one that's 2 weeks old. So I'll show you kind of the size difference between the two of them as well. These could also be used as dual purpose chickens. I'm actually just using them for egg production, like I previously said, but here's kind of a little bit of size difference between the two of them, and there's quite a bit of a size difference, surprisingly, even though they're just 1 week apart. If you look closely at the tip of this one's beak, you can actually see a little bump on there still, and that is actually still her egg tooth. So, again, a little bit of size difference 1 week makes. Next I've got, let's see, grab the easiest one, Buff Orpington. So these ones are a very winter hardy bird, a little bit maybe less of an egg layer than some of the ones that I've got in here. This one lays about 190 eggs on average per year. Some of the other ones that I've got in here are upwards of 200, 250 on average per year. But I really like the Buff Orpington because it's a fairly winter hardy breed, and it's a good option for people that are looking for something like that. So this one is my Rhode Island Red. It's a little bit, you'll notice here in a second that this one is a little bit darker than the ones I'm going to pull out next, but very similar. A little bit more chill than the last ones we pulled out. So this one is also a good dual purpose bird. Males get a decent size for meat birds, and the hens lay a pretty decent amount of eggs, about that 250 range. So this is pretty similar to your Rhode Island Red, but this is a Production Red. You can tell it's a little bit lighter in color, but overall it is pretty similar in looks. Again, this one is a very good egg layer, about 250 eggs plus on average a year. So, the last one I'm going to show you guys is a Silver Laced Wyandotte. I've got a couple of those in here. So, these ones end up being pretty good looking birds when they grow up. Also a good egg laying breed. So, that is your Silver Laced Wyandotte. So now that we've kind of looked at some of the breeds that I've got and purpose for them, most of them being egg laying. Obviously, there could be a little bit of difference. Some of those are dual purpose. Talked about that. Other thing we could talk about is what you need, what kind of equipment that you need for raising chicks. So one thing that you're definitely going to need is obviously a container to hold them in. As you can see here, I have a decent sized metal stock tank for them. Got a heat lamp, a waterer, and a feeder. So it's very important to always provide fresh water for them. You can't maybe necessarily tell from here, but I actually have that waterer elevated so they don't make a mess out of it as easily. You can do that with the feeder as well. However, I don't have that one elevated right now, but I would definitely suggest doing that as they grow, elevating it to a little bit more of their height. So in terms of the heat lamp, for the first week it needs to be about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and you need about a 5-degree drop every week after that. So ways you could do that is maybe raise the heat lamp up a little bit. That's what we've been doing since ours is connected to the ceiling up here. Just kind of shortening the wire that it's on. Other things you might think about with that, or things you might notice if you've got chicks in there, is if it's too hot, they're going to kind of stay away from that heat lamp and go out towards the edges. It's a little bit too warm. You can notice that by their behavior. If it's too cold, generally they're going to be all huddled really close together and straight underneath the beam of that lamp. So if you don't have a thermometer in there, there's other ways to kind of check and see if it's too hot or too cold for them. So nutrition-wise, we'll talk about a couple things. So for their first 2 to 3 days of life, they're still kind of receiving nutrition and their nutrients from their yolk sac. So if you order chicks through the mail, or once you move them from the incubator, you need to make sure they've got pretty quick access to food and water. Another thing to do when you do that, when you're switching them, if you're switching them from an incubator, dip their beaks into the water, and that kind of encourages them to take their first drink, helps them along with that, and then they kind of have an idea of what they need to be doing from there. So other things to talk about: age for going outside for egg-laying chicks would probably be about that 4 to 6 week range. So long as the temperature is kind of staying about an average of 50 degrees outside, they should do fairly fine. Another thing I guess I forgot to mention, we'll backtrack here for a second, is what you should feed chicks. So right here, I just have a bag of feed from Orscheln's Country Lane. It's just an 18% starter mix, starter grower mix, and it's medicated. You make sure you want to buy something like that for your chicks, and then it's in the form of like crumbles, so it's small enough and it's easy enough for them to eat. So there are a couple other varieties out there, such as non-medicated, or they have different feed for meat birds, broiler chicks. So that's something that you might want to keep in mind depending on what you're doing. So again, when you move them outside, about that 4 to 6 week range, once they're full grown, some things you might want to keep in mind is that they need to have about 2 to 3 square feet per bird inside of a chicken coop, and then outside, if they have an outside pen or an outside run, about 8 square feet per bird out there. So that's kind of some things you might want to keep in mind. Moving on, we're going to talk just briefly about some broiler chicks, what you would maybe need to do if you're raising them. Those ones generally have quite a bit of a shorter lifespan because they're generally going to be butchered about 8 to 9 weeks of age, and by that point they're going to have reached weights of about 10 pounds for male birds and 8 pounds for female birds. So things to remember if you're going to raise some meat birds: you should probably keep them separate from you should keep them separate from egg-laying chicks if you're raising them as well, and they're going to be raised in a slightly different setup. So first thing to note with them is you could free feed your broiler birds, most popular one being probably a Cornish cross, for about the first 5 days, and then in 12-hour intervals after that until butchering time. So 12 hours on with feed, 12 hours off. If you kind of overfeed them and leave them food 24/7, it can kind of cause them some health problems that they're kind of already prone to by overeating, and that kind of just exacerbates the whole problem that they have. So that's some things you might want to keep in mind with them. If you're raising them as well, whatever area that you're keeping them in, you might not want to put roosts in there or anything, because getting on there will bruise their breast meat, so definitely some things to keep in mind. But as far as temperature and everything, you're going to keep that pretty similar to what you've got going on with egg-laying chicks. Keep them under heat lamps. Just some things to think about. So they're also going to eat a different type of feed as well. There's a specific variety. I don't have it here since I don't have broiler chicks, but specifically formulated for meat birds. So if you're going to go to Orscheln's or whatever and pick up those chicks, order them in the mail, just kind of do a little bit of research, make sure you're buying the right feed for that. It should be specifically labeled for them in terms of meat birds. So that's kind of a little bit of a wrap up on what I've got today. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message or anything like that. There's a last little peek. They're actually under the heat lamp right now, so there you have it. Thank you for watching. Again, any questions, just let me know.